Hey, good evening, everybody. It's Steve with Real Progressives. And, a friend of mine came to me earlier tonight and said, Steve, you were a Republican. And, obviously, a lot of the things that we're trying to achieve, a lot of the conversations we're trying to have with people, are difficult to have with conservatives. And they said, well, being that you were a conservative, Steve, that you used to be a Republican for years, how do you broach these subjects with Republicans? How do you even have a conversation with Republicans? And, I think it's important to understand before you even start these conversations to understand that, Republicans love their kids too, They're human beings. They're misguided. They've got a lot of strange beliefs that don't match up with, progressives and, liberals or whatever. But, I don't really relate so much to the liberal class so much as I do the progressive world. Because the progressive world, is in search of truth, right? So if you're looking at a conservative that claims that they're more interested in truth, and they want to be truthful, you can sit there and have a conversation with them founding on truth. You can approach it from a standpoint of truth, not trying to convince them necessarily right off the bat, but you got to realize that there's certain buzzwords that conservatives hear that before they even have a chance to have the conversation, they've already tuned you out. They've already heard you say, welfare. They've already heard you say government spending. They've already heard you talk about programs. And they've already kind of got you pegged as a socialist or a commie or, any number of silly, nonsensical things. But they've been brainwashed for years by the Rush Limbaugh network and by the church, quite frankly, even though, I have no hate for the church. I do have a problem with some of the bullshit that's come out of there in terms of the political ideology that emanates from evangelical Christianity. But, conservatives genuinely are concerned about fairness in their mind, okay? Hey, Rob. So as you think about fairness in a conservative's mind, you've got to realize that they're looking at corruption in their mind. They're looking at people getting something that they didn't deserve, getting something that maybe they didn't work for. They're looking at people that are scamming the system. They're really, really, really heavily stuck on this idea of personal responsibility, and they don't really understand that all these factors that go into their decision-making process, are flawed. There's a lot of good things. I mean, let's be fair, right? Just between progressives. If somebody doesn't deliver on some activist thing, let's say you're setting up a march. Let's say you're setting up a website. Let's say you're doing something for the movement. And somebody commits that they're going to have whatever they're going to have to you by 6 p.m. tonight. You can be as completely progressive as you want to be, but if they don't deliver on the time that they suggested they would deliver, you're going to be upset. You're going to be upset, even as a progressive. You're going to be upset that someone didn't follow through on what they said they were going to do. Well, conservatives are very, very hell-bent on that. So when people don't do what they say they're going to do, when they don't step up to the plate and live up to what they said they're going to do, conservatives are very, very, very hell-bent on keeping your word in their mind. Okay? So if you remember the crucifixion of George W. Bush, H.W. Bush, back in the early 90s, 80s and 90s, he said, "Read my lips, no new taxes." And when he did it, he was crucified by the right wing of his party for not holding true to what he said he would do. Something that progressives fail to do continuously to the Democratic Party. So, Republicans, many of them probably have a lot of progressive ideas. They just don't trust that there is enough safety gaps in there to block people from getting over on the system, for gaming the system. They're very, very big on this whole idea of following the rules, not straying far from the path. But that's just the evangelical side, right? A lot of people have just always been, we have them on the Democrat side too, I'm sure you can relate. But many people were just born revering Reagan. Many people just have it in their head that, hey, this is what you do, man. Those stupid liberals, libtard, whatever. And so you have to get past all these things that they've got in their head as to what you are as a progressive or as a liberal. So getting all that out of the way, another big thing that they are really hell-bent on is the idea that they don't want to pay for your bad choices. So in their minds, they're looking and they see their paycheck come, and they look over here in column A and it says that they're getting 38% of their dollars taken out in taxes. Like 38%, what the hell? Who am I paying for? What country am I paying for? What small country am I paying for? And then they go home and they open their mailbox up and there's bills in there. And they're looking at their bills, they're thumbing through their bills, and they're like, son of a bitch, I don't think I can make my electric payment. I don't think I can make my phone bill. Oh shit, the mortgage is going to be a week late. It's going to hurt my credit. And then they look over there again at their tax bill. And they look down and they see it. Then all of a sudden they see someone out there advocating that we should raise taxes to pay for shit. And they sit there and they say, son of a bitch, I'm not paying for that son of a bitch. Okay? And then all of a sudden they come up with all these machinations for who's getting their money. And it all stems from their life being really tight too. They've looked at their bills, they can't make their bills, it's tight, they look over here. Or better yet, let's say they always make their bills on time, they never miss a payment. They scrimp on the cable TV, they get rid of cable, they don't go anywhere, they don't do anything, they stay home, they mind their pennies. And then all of a sudden they see people out there buying a $150 pair of shoes. And they're like, son of a bitch, he's getting over there. I bet he's on welfare, isn't he? And he's got them $150 pair of shoes. And this is the way the mind works. And you can see them in line at the grocery store when someone is using food stamps or somebody is using, their WIC or something like that. They're looking over to see what they got, judging whether or not they deserve it. And a lot of that comes down to the fact that in their cart, they bought generic food. In their cart, they bought something that was pinching pennies. They were trying to save money. And they see somebody over there with a government check, and they're saying, well, shit, they're living better than I am, and I work for a living, God damn it. Okay, so you start seeing this progression of rage that comes from them as their life is hard. They're making personal decisions to live really tight, and they don't realize the systemic issues that cause people to be in destitution. Even though they themselves are, they've been raised not to question, not to ask for anything, not to seek help, but to live as the Lord saith. And unfortunately, the idea of personal responsibility is king. So it goes back to the Bible, it goes back to Calvinism. And these folks really believe that you get what you deserve. So if you're struggling, well, you did something wrong. If you got a sickness, you got lung cancer, something like that, you shouldn't have been smoking. You can't make your bills, well, you shouldn't have bought that car. You can't pay your student loans, well, I guess you better go move back home with mom and dad then. They have a very, very, very rigid set of rules. And they don't always live by them themselves. But you need to understand this as you try to broach these subjects, especially when it comes to economics. If you go into our debates looking for single payer, and you hear St. Bernard up there talking about we got to raise taxes to pay for things, Or you hear Elizabeth Warren say we got to raise taxes to pay for things. Or you hear Robbie Reich saying we got to raise taxes to pay for things. Or you hear Jill Stein say we got to raise taxes to pay for things. You have to look across the aisle at the GOP and know that they've already gotten Grover Norquist to say, you will be primaried. We will put all your money against you. We will go after you full bore if you raise taxes. If you raise taxes a nickel, we'll primary you and get you the hell out of office. So that's the world that the conservative lives in. Then on top of it, there's another side to this, and that's the free market side. They don't trust that government can do anything right. They think anything the government touches will turn to shit. Now, they don't realize that a large part of that is because their politicians that they elect defund it so that it looks like it's shit. And by defunding it, it does perform like shit. And then instead of assuming that, hey, maybe we should pour money back into these programs, they assume, well, shit, all government programs don't work. They're just taking my hard-earned tax dollars and wasting it on this garbage program. So you can certainly see veins of truth in the conservative logic. It's not all horrible. You got to realize that we as progressives consider things in a similar way at times too. The only difference is conservatives literally don't mind letting someone suffer because they figure enough suffering and they'll get their ass off that couch, they'll get their ass off that porch, and they'll go ahead and then get themselves a job. It don't matter. They ain't got to be too good for that job. They can rake leaves. They can do whatever. Okay? So you got to understand that there's a lot of things, and they are big on scapegoating. When something doesn't go wrong, right in their life, they oftentimes look outward. They look outward for a scapegoat, for someone that caused this pain to them. And they usually find somebody that is similar to them but different than them, like an African American maybe, or maybe a immigrant, or maybe someone else who's on the food chain in the lower tiers who is broke and living badly, and maybe they just start assuming that the problem is that guy right there. Or maybe it's that crazy liberal progressive commie out there trying to take all their hard-earned tax dollars. We got to hunker down. We got to protect our kinfolk. We got to protect everything, right? And this is not completely unfounded. You look and you even see progressives out there, some of the less educated progressives trying to take to the woods, trying to go off the grid, trying to live a very conservative lifestyle. There's a lot of commonality there. So as we present, economic truths, as a former Republican, it was always like, hey, look, I don't mind if we all get this. I don't mind if we all get this. But what I do mind is if you're only going to give it to those people that made bad choices. If you want to give it to all of us, then fine. And you know what? Here I am, flash forward years later, far, far left. And I am absolutely committed to citizens' benefits as opposed to a welfare state. I'm absolutely committed to everyone getting Medicare for all. I'm into citizens' rights. I'd like to see Medicare for all. I'd like to see a federal job guarantee where there is no involuntary unemployment. I would like to see a complete conversion to green energy. I'd like to see a lot of things. But you got to get past this bone of contention here, right? Conservatives don't want to be controlled. They're fiercely independent. They're ruggedly individualistic, even though they do end up needing a government and they need all these things. In their minds, they're rugged individualists. And they're going to make it by their bootstraps. So helping them not think of this as a handout, helping them realize that we're going to do this for everyone, I think that's a really, really important way of getting past their objections. And I think it's a really, really good way of lifting all ships, right? So when you think about it, if you just think about what is the core issue, we want single-payer health care. If you try to make it so that only people under this income get it, then they can always scowl and they can always go, well, those poor people are stealing from the government teat. They're sucking on the government teat. You know that you know that story that you hear all the time, right? They're just sucking off the government, dole. They're on the dole, whatever. And by making things citizens' benefits, I think you can bridge the gap with conservatives. I think you can find a common stroke right there that they can buy into. Because quite frankly, I don't care if it's Trump getting friggin' Medicare for all, or whether it's Hillary Clinton getting Medicare for all, or Bernie or us. I want all people to have Medicare from cradle to grave. I'd love to see it. Why not? And this way there is no scowling, wagging finger of bad choices. It's just a citizen's benefit. Hey man, it's what we get. The other thing that's really important in my mind is, you've all heard me say this before, and you probably are sick of hearing me say it. But when I tell you that federal taxes don't fund spending, there's a reason for that. It's not just because it's some cute bumper sticker, although I'm glad that people are picking up on it. It's because when you fight a double war, you already know the GOP is not going to raise taxes. They have the vast majority of the state houses. They are actually in control right now. Okay? So going in with a bunch of tax hikes is a non-starter. You're also seeing them cut lots and lots of services. Now, I know it was only 3% of Meals on Wheels budget, but come on, cutting 3% away from Meals on Wheels, what are you, crazy, right? In their mind, it's another handout. It's yet again another handout. So they're very, very big on this whole conserving blah, blah, blah. They think that they're being really, really good stewards. But they ignore the military, right? They ignore these things. And it's all founded in this pride in America. They don't have pride in themselves right now because, my God, they're slumming it. They're poor too. But they can take pride in the red, white, and blue, right? They can take some sort of pride in this flag that represents their grandparents or represents some other nostalgic feeling that helps them forget about how rough life is for them. So while we're sitting there saying, screw the flag, man, screw this shit, right? They are literally sitting there thinking to themselves, you know what? These colors don't run. They're literally, 100%. It's all part of fascism, right? It's nationalism. And it's not like they're just bad people. These are people that have been raised to believe this, right? I mean, think about it. When you go to wake up and you get breastfed and you're hearing about wonderful things about Ronald Reagan, and then you get up and you go out and play in the field and you're hearing about, stupid commies and stupid liberals and those damn whatevers, right? This is your environment. This is what you grow up. This is who you relate to and how you see the world. Part of that can be explained by watching how liberals and progressives fight against the notion that taxation does not fund spending at the federal level. Why? Because they've been saying it for years and years and years. So all this to say that there's a lot of strongholds that conservatives have that you know nothing of. And beating them over the head with it, it's probably not going to do anything but reinforce what they've heard from Rush Limbaugh, or reinforce what they've heard from G. Gordon Liddy, or reinforce what they've heard from Fox News. And quite frankly, let's be fair, the Democratic Party, They've been an awful albatross. They've been liars. They have appropriated progressive culture, the word progressive, while being completely not progressive at all. They've been Wall Street crony capitalist shills. So these folks hear them saying progressive things, and guess what? They don't do progressive things. And then they blame the Republicans when they go ahead and Cory Booker doesn't sign a pharmaceutical bill, okay? They always find a way to blame the Republicans. So you got to look at politics as a whole and realize that when you're born that way, you're born into a family that way, you're born into an area that everybody believes that way, and all of a sudden you come into a room where there's a bunch of liberals or this and that and the other, and you're looking at the Democrats and they don't deliver, they don't do what they say, they always blame the Republicans, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, guess what? They're not going to listen to that shit. So you got to ask yourself, what is your goal? What is your goal? Is your goal to win, which means single payer, which means green energy, which means free college for all, not for just families of 125,000 and less, for all. If you think about this stuff, if you think about what you want, what you really want, not what you feel like doing, which is, I want to bash Trump, I want to beat up on them, I want to do this, I want to do that. If you think to yourself, what is it that I really want? What is it that I stand for? And then you think about who your audience is, right? There are ways of winning these battles. Do you think Richard Nixon wanted the EPA? Think about it. I mean, when you think about all the different things that we as progressives want, we don't live in a progressive country, folks, as much as I wish we did. We live in a fascist country. We live in a neo-national country that is just like any other one you've read in a book. We've got the flag wavers. We've got the gun toters. We've got all that stuff right here. And it isn't going to go away by yelling and screaming about it because they outnumber us right now, it looks like, quite frankly. And if you sit there and you don't realize their buttons, where they're going, get Jeff out of here. Jeff, you know what? I feel for you, brother, because I used to be one of you, and quite frankly, I grew up. So anyway, the bottom line is that if you actually want to break through, you need to appeal to their sense of justice. You need to appeal to their sense of fairness. If you don't appeal to their sense of fairness and explain to them that we are going to take care of our veterans, we're going to take care of our elderly, we're going to take care of all citizens. If you do it that way, as opposed to we're just going to take care of this, identity politics has destroyed our ability to make progress. Identity politics has really, really, really put a hurting on our ability to build bridges, because now everything is so balkanized. We've got these little tiny niches of people. Little tiny niches of people. And they're all at each other's throat because they're all fighting over the same breadcrumbs. So it really comes down to meeting them at their point of need if you're trying to make your case. They're not on the same team. They're not striving for single payer. They think it's communism. They're still living in the Red Scare. So you've got a mammoth hill to climb, and you're not going to get there yelling and screaming at them. Now, I yell and scream at progressives all the time. Why do you think that is? First of all, I'm one of you. Second of all, our side of the street isn't clean. I can't get to the other side of the street until our side is clean. And we've got to make sure we've got our shit together. We got to make sure that our message is clear. And we got to make sure that the people running around, do you know there are people, when I tell them the operational realities of the way taxes are deleted upon receipt and then new spending goes out, they tell me I'm full of shit. They call it magic money. This is no joke. This is progressives. So I can't even get to worrying about conservatives. I've got to worry about having a team to go to war with. Imagine telling a progressive that we can have the entire Green New Deal, that we can have the entirety of Bernie Sanders' plan, and a federal job guarantee, and a basic needs guarantee. And we can do these things without raising taxes on regular people. We could do that. When I tell people, hey, we can fix Flint, Michigan yesterday. Obama had the power to fix Flint, Michigan. He could have done it instantly. Did not do it. Rather point fingers at Snyder, the Republicans. Did not do it. Puerto Rico could have fixed it instantly. Did not do it. Didn't do it. All peddling a lie. So it's hard to tell the conservatives, you got to get on with the plan, gang. Because our own leaders are still telling myths and legends too. And they're telling them, and this is the worst part, folks, they're telling those myths and legends because they know that you don't understand economics. Because you don't understand economics. They can't tell you some wild fantasy that taxes don't fund spending. You wouldn't believe it. So in order to get elected, they've got to talk tough. They're going to be tough on waste. They're going to be tough. They're going to be real tough. Let me ask you a question. If you know that federal taxes don't fund spending, if you know this, who do you think's paying for Trump's detail at Trump Tower for Melania? It's going to be a tough one. You hate Trump, don't you? So what do you think? Who's paying for that? Is it your hard-earned tax dollars? No, it's not, is it? But it is somebody's paycheck. It is somebody's paycheck. That's for sure. So when we sit there and we pick and choose when we're going to tell the truth and when we're not going to tell the truth, we set the stage for this war with conservatives. Conservatives think we're hypocrites, and we are. Conservatives think we are absolutely idiots when we sit there and we want to try and tell them that we've got to spend on this stuff, but then we flip around and we talk about the same things they talk about reducing the deficit. Reducing private savings? Are you nuts? When we sit there and we laud Bill Clinton for a balanced budget because he cut welfare and he sat there and deregulated the banks and he sat there and really, really screwed Americans. When we sit there and we brag about that, and then the Republicans do the same and we get mad about it, makes it real tough, doesn't it? And when we talk about how much we hate war, like Republican bombs blow up more than Democrat bombs or, quite frankly, anybody's bombs. I mean, we've got to have our shit together, because when you go to tell somebody they're wrong about something, when you try and reach out and say you're wrong, and you're sitting there as a hypocrite, and you've been defending the whole idea of we got to raise taxes to fund spending, but then the flip side is you're trying to tell them we need to spend all this money on these things, and then they go ahead and they cut taxes, because that's spending too, by the way, and you tell them that they blew the budget up. it just is ridiculous. The United States government cannot live beyond its means. It has no means to live beyond. It is a currency issuer. It doesn't borrow its own currency from another country. You understand this, correct? So when you're talking to a conservative and you try to tell them, you can touch them at their point of need. They understand that they don't want their taxes going up. When our politicians tell us that your taxes are going to go up, that doesn't pay for things, right? It doesn't. No matter how many times you say it, it doesn't do it. So why fight that battle with the Republicans over and over again? Do you want to just raise taxes? Or do you want single-payer health care? Seriously, what is it that you want? And if you're going to tell me we got to tax because of income inequality, I will tell you that taxing the rich does nothing for the poor. What does do something for the poor is a federal job guarantee. So that involuntary unemployment is eradicated forever. So that people in the inner cities, etc., can leave the inner cities and go work in Colorado or go work somewhere else, go wherever. But see, conservatives can understand and can deal with a federal job guarantee because in their minds, somebody's working for their keep, right? It's that Calvinist thing in their minds. But what happens when you find out that the federal job guarantee is serving the public purpose? It's not just digging ditches. It's not just doing whatever. Maybe it's doing something like teaching an art class, or maybe it's taking care of your sick mother, or maybe it's raising a child. You know, the federal job guarantee can be whatever local communities deem is within their best interest. It doesn't have to be digging ditches like these fools say. So when you're talking to a conservative, understand that while on one hand, a basic income sounds real good, what is the difference between a basic income and a voucher? It's still a basic income for the investor class. It's not really anything more than status quo for you and I. But a federal job guarantee would give you benefits. It would give you everything. And so ultimately, if you really want to penetrate into the strongholds of the Republicans, you need to explain to them that this is for their children, not just somebody they don't like, that it is something that will lower costs, that it will bring about responsible behavior, because people that get checkups, for example, tend to be healthier and tend to make less bad decisions and tend to be less violent when they actually have a nutrition. And they tend to do better in school when they tend to get enough sleep because they're not living in a war zone, because everybody has a federal job guarantee. When the economy is anchored to work, when it's anchored to labor, it's impossible to screw with the working man now. The boss man can't threaten you with destitution anymore. But for conservatives, understanding that instead of a handout, as they say, you're actually providing people jobs. And that's something that we're willing to pay for so that they have an opportunity to self-actualize from the left, but in their minds, so that they're actually working for their dime. Okay? The reality is that the federal job guarantee is not just make work. It is actually self-actualizing. It's whatever your local community deems as necessary. These are the kinds of bills that we need to be pushing for. And these are the kind of conversations we need to have with exactly, Doug, that's a great point. Crime rates would drop incredibly. Desperate people do desperate things. When you're cut out of the main economy, you go to alternative economies. And the economy of the inner city and these places tends to be drugs and ass and favors with guns. And that, unfortunately, is just the reality of the streets when you've deprived people of the ability to earn a regular income, a living wage. People do what they have to do. Yes, ending the war on drugs would happen naturally that way, wouldn't it? A lot of it really, truly would. I mean, there's an awful lot to be had here, folks. You've got to always ask yourself, what is your goal? What is your goal? Is your goal to win? Or is your goal just to beat someone over the head? Again, I beat the snot out of people that sit there and troll. I do. I always do. Why is that? Because economics bores the tears out of most people. So I have to be a human alarm clock sometimes. Doesn't mean that I want to be. I'd like to be calm like I am now. But sometimes people do need a wake-up call. And what I'm telling you is a radical departure from what you've typically heard in the past. Now, I know you've heard it from me, but my point is that when you say stuff that's radical, that makes people have a paradigm shift, when they're not ready for that truth to be thrown at them, they retrench, they retreat back into old thinking. And when you think about it that way, did you win? No, you didn't win. You didn't win at all. In fact, you maybe set the movement back. The only way that we're going to win any of these wars is by building large coalitions. And it's going to have to be large coalitions. It's going to even have to be the vote blue sycophants. It's going to have to be some red people, some of those freaking LOL libertarians even. We're going to have to find ways to appeal to them. But the one thing that we can't do is we can't compromise on truth. Because once we're caught in a lie, our integrity is shot, and then they'll use it against us forever. So we talk about Congress not serving our needs and serving the needs of the billionaire class and the corporations and stuff like that. I believe that's very true. Obviously, we need to get money out of politics. But the only way to do that is to create a groundswell of support based on reality. Because if you get money out of politics and you elect quote unquote progressives that don't understand economics, you're going to end up with neoliberal solutions. Or worse, you're going to end up chasing conspiracy theories that are bullshit and that get you even worse results. So it's very important to stay in the truth, to not stray into bullshit, to get your bullshit detector up, and to keep it running. But you need to go into these things understanding who your audience is. Because these folks, they don't want to hear from a commie. They don't want to hear from a libtard. They don't want to hear from one of you foolish socialists. They want to hear from only their people, only their trusted sources. Now, I went to Harrisburg's capital, state capital. I was on the steps with a bunch of Trump supporters at a Trump rally, and I was covering it for Real Progressives. And I went up to them and I told them about modern monetary theory. And I told them about the fact that taxes don't fund spending and that they are lying to you too. And that hit them. When they realized they were being lied to as well, when they realized that they were not just, the ones holding the truth, they were being lied to. I had a couple of them sitting there going, wow, okay, you got to tell me more about this. And so I talked to them. And I think it's important to understand that we have common truths. Not as many as we'd like, but we do have common truths. And if we can understand the basics that taxes don't fund spending, then we can start building large coalitions to demand our elected officials actually act in our interests. And it doesn't have to be a party line thing. Now all of a sudden we're selling off We're getting the Republicans involved. We're getting the vote blue sycophants involved. We're getting the independents and the LOL libertarians and the progressives involved. This is very, very tough times. Every time you say something now, conspiracy theorists are throwing it around. He's Soros bought. He's a Rothschild, blah, blah, blah. He's a neoliberal. You know, and this stuff really, really, really is counterproductive. I mean, our people that are supposedly progressives are running around literally libeling and smearing people, calling them Soros bought and they're establishment shills and this, that, and the other, when they are not. Now, there are establishment shills for sure. And there are definitely sellouts, and there's definitely moles and all kinds of other stuff. But when you sit there and you tear down progressives with these smear tactics, all it does is divide the movement for real in a way that's completely unnecessary. The reality is, if you want to win these wars, you've got to spread truth so that we are educated enough to take our fight to Capitol Hill, to take our fight to the White House, to take our fight to our state capitals, to actually activate on these things and talk about them at our town halls. People need to have the courage of conviction to speak about the economic truths we tell. Folks, I don't do this 7 days a week because I'm not positive. Folks, I'm positive. I've learned. I've got the best teachers you could ever ask for. You know? And I bring those teachers to you all. And we've got to take that knowledge and we've got to craft messages that penetrate the vote blues and the vote reds. We got to find ways of building these large, broad-based coalitions that are insurmountably powerful. And not by the whole enchilada, issue by issue by issue. We can't get lazy about this. Lives are on the line. Lives are on the line. It's so important that we find new and effective means of communication. Now, I sometimes will roll in the mud with people because I'm exasperated by trolling. And I think of them as murderers because they're distracting from my work. And I consider my work to be life-saving, or I wouldn't do it the way I do it. I swear to God, it's the truth. And every delay that I see in us being able to enact these policies, and every delay I see in us getting people to recognize macroeconomic reality, I see that as death. I see people dying. I literally see people dying because of those delays. Because people go, oh, that's just magic money, man. What does it grow on trees? Ha, ha, ha. What about hyperinflation, dude? What about the... I see them as murderers. Folks, murderers. And I have to overcome that so I can somehow or another penetrate that thickness and get the truth in there, because the real enemy is ignorance. The real enemy is not a party, it's ignorance. And the cure for ignorance is truth. And that's what we're trying to give you guys. So with that, I hope you guys take the time to educate yourselves before you worry about yelling and screaming about the other guy. You know, it's like, it's really about us. It's about each one teach one. It's about taking this seriously enough that you activate across the country. I'm reaching thousands, many thousands. I'm very happy about that. I'm just one guy and I'm reaching thousands and thousands of people. And that's a good thing. But if each of you guys started magnifying your voice, we would reach millions of people. And that, my friends, is how we make some change. That's how we make change. So you've got to learn to moderate your voice, moderate your speech, moderate your tone, moderate your message. But you've got to learn the truth. Because sitting there talking about paying for stuff, folks, even Social Security, let's take that one real quick before I get off here. Social Security, like war bonds, was sold to the American people as something you're investing in. So you pay this money to the government deletes it, because that's what we do we delete it. And then when a payment is due, they make a keystroke and payments go out. That's it. And so as we sit there and we look at Social Security being insolvent, how do you run out of keystrokes? How do you run out of keystrokes? The guy get nubs for fingers? He could probably use his nose to keystroke those dollars in. So how is Social Security broke? Think about it. I mean, once the light bulb goes on, it's almost embarrassing the lie they're telling us. I mean, it's not almost, it is embarrassing. And I jokingly talk about the Chinese giving us dollars, but yo, Ho Chi Minh, yo, Ming, yo, whatever. We're short of about 20 trillion in US dollars. You think you can throw them over here? So conservatives are hell-bent on this debt, right? Well, when you think about it, right, the US has sold treasury bonds. That's dollars that have been pulled out of the equation. It's held back. If those folks cashed in, they cash in, they get all kinds of US dollars. Lots more keystrokes. And guess what? We call that our national savings, not our national debt. Because that money, if spent back in, would make the economy blow up. You have to spend that money to buy things, right? So let's say they bought a company for $12 trillion. Somebody's got $12 trillion to go and do whatever. All of a sudden. So just remember, debt, things like that, these things that the GOP worries about, those are the real issues. And it's important that you learn modern monetary theory. It's important that you learn federal financing from 1971 to present, because we're no longer on the gold standard. So all the talk about devaluing the currency and stuff like that, it's old news, man. That's gold standard stuff. You need to be able to have answers for these things. You need to be able to talk about it, because these are the reasons they say no to the spending you want. You know what I'm saying? I mean, they don't think about spending to Israel because they think Israel's our friend and they're trapped around by all these Muslims. They don't think about that because they're Christians. And Christians are naturally taught that Israel is their friend. And you know what? Israel's not a bad place. It's not Israel that's the problem. The problem is Zionism. The problem is the militarism of the government. I'm not in any way, shape, or form anti-Semitic, and I despise bigotry. But while they defend Jews, they're just as quick to bum rush Muslims. So there's a whole culture thing there as well. But this debt thing is a very real concern for conservatives. And unless you understand that the national debt is really our nation's national asset, in other words, that's money that's been parked, and if it's ever released into the world, man, oh man, we're going to be in for a boom. People don't realize that. One man's debt's another man's asset. In the case of the federal government's the currency issuer. So it can never run out of money, ever. Ever, 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 never, ever. It's the world's assets, yes. But you understand what I'm saying. We can literally never run out of money. So when they say that we're broke, when Obama, imagine Obama lied. Obama said the people's credit card of China or something like that, right? He lied to us. He lied to us. So you got to be able to look at the Democrats and realize the lies they've told to make the Republicans understand that you're not defending evil to make them win with you. You're sitting there calling them out. You're calling a spade a spade. None of us defend blue shit. You tell the truth. You tell the truth. You don't sit there and act like Democrats weren't warmongers. Democrats bombed 8 countries. You don't sit there and tell them that Democrats help the poor. Democrats specifically cut welfare. Democrats fought for the friggin' banking deregulation. They also, worse, they were willing to help sell us out on bankruptcy reform. And they were willing to make student loans not dischargeable. They have largely been the cause of the neoliberal scourge, just like the Republicans. So there should be no good guy in this when you're talking about it. It's not about the parties, it's about our families. It's about us. It's about we the people, for real, for once. And if you put it in those terms, we might just have a shot at getting single payer in our lifetime. We might just have a shot at fixing climate change before a mass extinction. We might be able to do these things if we stop defending blue to talk to red and vice versa. Stick with truth. Stay out of conspiracy land unless you've got facts and proof. If you don't have facts and proof, don't spin a damn yarn telling somebody a story to fill a gap that you can't answer with truth. It makes you look like an idiot and it makes you not credible. You've got to hold your credibility so that you can make the change in yourself, in our community, and across the aisle. So with that, I am Steve Grumbine. Have a great night, everybody.